Enjoying the podcast but want to learn more best practices for account management? Pick up a copy of A Dragon Walks Into a Meeting, a tactical guide to client management. Available at Amazon or wherever books are sold.
You were there to laugh at the account manager?
I was there to laugh and make my bad jokes and bring Fred water. Well, here we go. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Account Management, a tactical guide for success. I got my good friend, John Brown. John, how are you?
I am good. And on the other side of the microphone, I've got my good friend, Fred Fuller.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a little while since we've done this.
I know. It's, I think it's you get what you pay for. And since we're doing this for free, it's the frequency is suspect.
Well, I think that's part of it. For me, the other part is after spending 800 hours a week on Zoom calls, it's hard to get motivated to do one more.
I'm glad you said that because my wife said to me a few weeks ago, she's like, "Hey, we're going to visit with some friends." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, great." She's like, "Yeah, we're going to do a Zoom call." And I'm like, I can't do it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I can't do it. There's in person. Super happy to do it. Love it.
Yeah. In person, standing on, broken glass that's on fire. Sure. Zoom.
Happy to do it.
No way.
I'll meet you inside of a dumpster if you want. Like anywhere. Doesn't matter. But Zoom call? No, I will not do that. Right.
Yeah. But here we are. Our dedication, our commitment to the cause brings us here.
To the cause of good account management. That's right.
That's right.
We're doing everything we can to make account management better.
Yeah, that's right.
Are we done patting each other on the back now?
Yeah, maybe.
Should we probably talk about account management?
Well, and I think maybe we break in the middle and talk about feelings or something like that. I know you like to do that.
No, I do. I do care about feelings. I care about your feelings. I do care about feelings. It's important to me.
I'm just glad to know people have them. All right. So what are we going to talk about today, John? Today, we're going to talk about remind the client why you were there. And that is like when I hear myself say those words, I'm like, that doesn't sound very brilliant, but it is so important and really so often overlooked, right?
Yeah. I mean, and there's a bunch of reasons why we say it this way. Probably a fancier, more business-oriented way to say this would be, reinforce your value proposition with your client or, retell your story or something like that. But, we like to say remind the client why you were there, which is a little bit of saying, hey, make sure you go back to basics with your client every once in a while and remind them about the fundamentals of why your relationship exists, right?
Yeah.
And people forget to do that. And there's a bunch of reasons for that, like the curse of knowledge and some other reasons. We'll talk about all those, but yeah, that's the podcast. Remind the client why you're there.
Yeah. And, it's really funny when you talk about that in particular, like the basics. And I've got a story about that, but not yet. And then we're going to talk about QBRs, right? The importance of QBRs and like why we do them and what should be in them and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, we're going to spend the bulk of this podcast talking about the basics of a quarterly business review. They don't necessarily have to be quarterly. We call it a quarterly business review just to reinforce the point that they should be with some frequency, depending on the size of the client, what makes sense. But regular business reviews, and we're going to talk about 7 things that should be fundamental part of every quarterly business review.
7. I like it. I like that a lot. And, this is cool. This is a kind of an interesting, I think, podcast for us because it's actually on one hand, it's fairly light in that we're not talking about a whole bunch of different stuff. But we could go really, really, really deep on this, which we'll avoid to avoid putting everybody to sleep about, what should be on the graph on slide 7 in your QBR. That's not the point of this. But jumping in then, before we go into the QBRs, reinforcing the basics. So I have a great story about that. And that is, we did a monthly review of our product and business and so forth with the client. And we would do that. And they were focused very heavily on a couple of statistics or a couple of KPIs or whatever we want to call them, that weren't where they wanted them to be. They weren't bad, but they weren't where they wanted them to be. And in the process of being so heavily focused on that, they overlooked some of the really, really core basics of what we were doing, such as like our SLAs are uptime of 8 9s or whatever you want to call that, like flawless, right? The number of service related incidents, virtually zero. Right. The fundamentals of the software were working perfectly.
Right.
And that never got talked about. Right. It was always the thing of, you said I was going to make $10 and I made $9.50. Where's my 50 cents? Right. Yeah. Yes. But we also moved a mountain over here, but it didn't drive revenue. Did you, like those kind of things?
Yes, that is a perfect example, Fred. So like the fundamental stuff that you don't have to worry about every single day because it just works. You'd be surprised how often it's true that your competition can't do that, right? And because you forget to talk about it, it becomes a non-issue and therefore it's not a value prop to the client, right? So I like to call this the curse of knowledge, right? So we'll talk a little bit later about you should really deeply know your own product, but there's a downside to knowing so much about your own product and knowing what's going on in that you feel like when you talk with a client, you only have to talk about with things that are new, right? And because you have this curse of knowledge of, and the client will bring up something your competitor does that you don't do, but because you have this curse of knowledge, you're focused on that instead of being focused on the 10 things that you already do really, really well and reemphasizing those. So I also have a little story. I think I've told it before, but just the short version of this is a few years ago, I had a very, very large client that, we had put a ton of work into really making sure that we delivered software for them on time. And so like for 3 years running, I kept track of every software project we did for them and whether or not we delivered it on time with high quality and so on and so forth. It was a total of 56 projects. I want to say something like that. Like it was a ton of projects. And I think one of those 50 or so, we didn't meet the deadline. Right. And so we go present this to the client in a PowerPoint with, here's 56 rows of projects and how we've done all of them on time.
An except eye for chart. One. You gave him an eye exam.
Yeah. It was a little bit intentional, right? Not a very good chart, but to reinforce the point of, hey, there's a gajillion projects we did and they were all on time. And the head lead executive from a client in the room turns to the head of the person that owned us and said, "Hey, is this true?" She says, "Yeah, it's absolutely true." And there was stunned silence in the room because they had been telling their executives that we were always slow or late. But then when the truth comes out, the kind of fundamental, so our team believes we're doing a really great job. We have this curse of knowledge. But it wasn't until we put it in front of them very explicitly, and it just became shockingly clear, what the reality was. And there were just stunned faces in the room. It was kind of dead silence for a while. And I knew we'd landed the blow. And it was because we went back to the basics and said, here's something we're doing really, really well. And we never talk about it. And we're going to put it in front of you.
Yeah. John, that brings up a really interesting point because all it takes is one comment to become the perception. Right. So in your example, there's a perception that you're not delivering or you're not delivering on time or you're not delivering the right quantity or the quantity that is representative of reality. Right. And it's as simple as two people standing around the water cooler and one saying to the other, those guys are really struggling with this delivery. And when you play the telephone game, that turns into these guys never deliver on time.
Right.
Right. And now all of a sudden, that's the perception of your organization for everybody at the client, everybody.
Right.
And these are great. This is a great example, too, of how to address that of like, well, no, we're going to have a meeting and I'm not going to talk about the lack of perception or the misperception. I'm going to talk about the facts of what we do.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I really like that. I'm going to talk about the facts of what we do. Yeah. That's a great way of saying it. we put a lot of prep into those meetings. They were pretty big meetings. And so, you're not going to do that for every client in every situation, but it is important. I'll mention another thing that, when you're doing QBRs, that's also so there's the two big opportunities in my mind are the curse of knowledge, not realizing, that you need to go back to the basics. And then the second missed opportunity is when the client asks you for things, there's little kind of micro opportunities to reinforce your value proposition as well. So if the client asks you to do something that is routine for you, you can use that to point out that, yes, it's routine for me, and that's a value proposition for you, right? So, client asks you to create a new dashboard of metrics, and it's something that your company does, pretty routinely to, as a software delivery thing for them. You say, yeah, hey, Mr. Klein, we got that. We'll start right now. One of the great things about our software is we can do that for you really, really quickly. Right. So that last sentence, people overlook that opportunity to, when you say yes to the client, now you're delivering a value prop to them, remind them that you delivered a value prop for them. So there's a macro of, call it a QBR, whatever you want to call it, a big client mean to deliver that value prop. But there's also these micro opportunities as well that get missed.
Yeah. And you, if you're being a really good partner, then you're listening to a request of some kind, but you're also helping to figure out what they're trying to solve for. So having previously worked in a very, very data rich environment, your client will typically not be as aware of all the different metrics and measurements and so forth. The client may have that knowledge up front when you first engage in the partnership, but over time, that client will focus on the top 2 or 3 that are the most meaningful for her and her organization, right? And when they will call you and say, you know what, it would be really neat if we had a metric that showed this and did that, and if we could look at it this way, it's probably already there. Right. Yeah. It's probably just, oh yeah, you know what? That's cool. Let me add that in, and boom. And there's some people that think that the right approach here is to make it sound Herculean and like you're really doing something big for them and blah, blah, blah. I actually take the opposite approach, which is, hey man, we're really good at this. We know our stuff, and I can have that to you in the next hour.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. That's right. That's the value prop. So you just remind them, hey, I'm getting it to you in the next hour. Like, how fast is that? Right. Even if you're doing it, with a smile as a joke, right? Like, just reminding them that you have the ability to do that is good. Yeah. Let's get into how to, what is a QBR and how to do a QBR, the tactics of a QBR.
The tactics of a QBR. QBRs, first of all, let me start by saying this. First, yeah. I use the term QBR very loosely, right? When I say QBR, it goes, oh, quarterly business review. So you do it once every 3 months, and you did it. I think of it just the business review part. If you have a client that wants to do it monthly or quarterly or whatever, that's great, and it's a wonderful opportunity, and you should embrace that. It's probably not going to have that level of discipline about it in perpetuity. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. And even the largest clients that I've had, if you try to do it quarterly, you'll wind up, as a realistic matter, doing it 3 times a year, just with scheduling conflicts and things like that. I've never had a client that wanted it monthly. I think that is very possible, but I've not quite seen it. And I think there's some clients, like if you have 1,000 clients and they're all relatively small, maybe not 1,000, but if you have a large number, this might be more of an annual business review, right? So we'll talk about goal setting and some other things in later podcasts about how you think about deciding, but you need to have some sort of rubric for deciding which are key accounts, like your top 10 or whatever, that deserve a quarterly business review. And then below that, maybe we do it twice a year. And then below that, maybe we do it annually, right? So you have to think of, but I will say it's probably true that the right answer is not don't do anything at all. Even if it's once every 2 years for a very, very small client, right? So, the right answer is probably not ignore it, don't do it, right? But figuring out the right frequency. So we say quarterly business review because it's just a common term, but that's, to your point, doesn't have to be every quarter.
Yeah. And here's a little bit of advice. Whether it's quarterly or whatever that frequency is, see if there's some way you can align it with meaningful timelines for your client. right? So if your client is setting the budget in by October 31st for the next year, like, well, then you want to be in front of them in June or July if you think they're going to need some money to adopt some additional services or products that you have to offer. Be smart about it, right?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, in the agenda of what's in the QBR, we're not going to cover that in detail here because like every business is different. We don't know what your business entails. But as a general guideline, what we tend to suggest is, there's in general probably like three sections. It's one is something around current operations. That's probably fairly metrics driven, so measuring what you do as a business. So that's getting back to that very basics, like show them the basics of what you're doing and, with charts or data or, whatever it is. Right. So, one of the things operators always say is what gets measured gets managed. Yep. Right. So pick your measurements carefully. And that's important. Right. Pick the ones that will reflect well on you.
Right? Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
Don't pick the ones that are showing you going into the ditch necessarily. Although there might be times where that actually isn't. If the reality is it is going in the ditch and everybody does know you're going in the ditch, not showing that will make you look foolish. So you might as well go ahead and show them that. Right. So you'd have to be, we're laughing about it, but you do have to be a little thoughtful about that. Don't try to, candy coat something that is not, not true. Right.
Own it.
Yeah, you got to own it. That's exactly right. Yeah. Growth plans. So like to your point about, setting budgets, like, things that you want them to spend money on that are good, either good for you or good for the product or whatever. Product roadmap, future strategy, usually something around that. So like, where are you going in the future? This is really good more maybe for a more executive audience. Like what are some grand things we could do in the future? People love that stuff. So those are just, those are some things that would typically go in a typical business review, but you can do a business review without any slides. You can do it on a whiteboard. It's not about the medium, it's about the message, right? And we're going to talk about how you construct that message.
Yeah, it is. It's a critical tool. I'm trying to think of the right words. It's a critical tool to ensure that you are aligned on the relationship between you and your client. Mm-hmm. Like I just think that's absolutely critical. And this is one of the kind of soft skills that you just have or you don't when it comes to account management and relationships and so forth. But a large part of this QBR, and we're going to talk about how to think about it and how to approach it, but a large part of your job in a QBR is to read the audience. Mm-hmm. You will walk out of a QBR and everybody on your team is going, did you hear what they said? Did you hear what they said? Hey, did you hear that guy said this and that she said that? And did everybody write that down? Like, yeah. And did you see that when we were talking about the financials, everybody crossed their arms and pushed away from the table? Right. Like, so this is part of picking up a lot of information, some of which will be written and communicated in a way that we're very traditionally used to, but some of it's this verbal or nonverbal stuff that you kind of have to pick up on. But in order to avoid those type of moments, right, where you're talking about something and you're talking about how great it is, and your client is saying, yes, doesn't look so great to me, there's a way to avoid that, right?
Just don't go to the meeting.
Just don't go to the meeting altogether.
Just run away.
Fake a hamstring injury in the lobby. Trip
on the door sill and fall down and knock yourself out.
That's right. That's right. No, one of the way you avoid this, you can't. John, that's a great strategy, by the way. Like, hey, I'm just gonna not go to the meeting because whatever. I
had a really bad hangover. Sorry.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah. But the coordinate with your client, like that's one of the first things you want to do in a QBR is coordinate with your client. That's how you can avoid that awkward interaction, right? That awkwardness of I'm saying this and I think it's wonderful and the client doesn't think so. Now it's really, really awkward because it's going to be just this weird exchange of completely disagree with what you're saying.
Well, that's a good segue. Let's talk about the tactics of a QBR. Like, what do we do tactically to execute it? So there's 7 things that we're going to talk about. So the first is being entertaining. There's no shortage of that on this podcast. The second is expand your audience.
Were you multitasking? Is that what just happened?
No.
You checking your notes or looking at the lunch menu?
Maybe. I don't know.
What's
no? I'm looking at our notes for the podcast. The third is coordinate with the client for the QBR. So that's some of the things you just talked about. The fourth is don't go in tone deaf. Read the room. The fifth is tell stories in your QBR. And so this is a little bit about how to construct a QBR. So we'll go into that in some detail. The sixth is claim victory at least once during your QBR. Just jump up and yell victory. And then the seventh, be composed even when the client is shooting holes in you, which does happen in a QBR. So let's talk about each one of these. So this probably is not. I don't know if this is in the right order, but number one we picked is be entertaining.
I think it's in the right order.
You think that's right?
Yeah, I absolutely do.
There is some science to this, right? So like, executives at other companies, I mean, they're in meetings all day long. They're not always real exciting. Like if they know you as an entity can come in and be maybe just mildly entertaining and brighten up their day a little bit. Like that's actually going to do you some good. Now we're not talking about like getting out some balls and start juggling or anything like that when we say entertaining, right? What we're saying is, being positive, fun, that's what we mean by entertaining.
Yeah. I always think about it in this context. When as a smaller organization working with a really large financial institution, how much time of their day is spent sitting in meetings with a PowerPoint and a talking head of some kind, right? Or somebody, pontificating about, the finer points of X, right? Like they're meetings that are important, and I don't want to belittle all that, but it's okay to have personality in a meeting. And that's, I think, probably a better way to say, like, be entertaining. No, but just have personality. You're talking to people, man. You're interacting with people. It's what you're doing. It's like, it's not hard.
That's right. You want to take your preparation very seriously. And you want to take your delivery really seriously. Like, so I'm not saying don't be serious at all. But what I am saying is you can relax and enjoy yourself, enjoy what you just said, the person-to-person interaction, right? Like, and it can be serendipitous. It doesn't have to be like a joke you think of ahead of time, right? Like just being in the moment, I think will matter. You have a good story about this.
I do. I don't know if this product still exists. There was, at least for some period of time, there was a bottled water on the market, and it was called Fred Water. And it said, it was a clear bottle and big white letters, big block letters, Fred. And I found it because I went to a hotel one time, and it was sitting, that was the complimentary bottle of water. And I went, oh my gosh, this is absolutely awesome. And I had a client that I had a good rapport with. But truthfully, everything wasn't wonderful from like the product production standpoint. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't perfect either. Right. And so I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being perfect, we were sitting around a 6, 7, right? Somewhere in there. And I thought, well, we're going to this QBR. It'll actually probably lighten it up a lot. And I bought a case of Fred Water, and I brought it into the meeting with me. And I just handed it out at the beginning of the meeting and said, you're all very welcome. And everybody got a chuckle out of it. And one or two of them looked like.
Well, I was there. What I remember is you actually pulled one of the bottles out and very slowly set it on the table in front of everybody. And everybody just started cracking up. Right. Because here it is, Fred Water.
I appreciate. Yeah. It's all about the delivery. It's
right. Yeah.
Yeah. But that was a good example of, first of all, I knew the audience.
Right.
Right. And so I knew I was okay to go do that. Had we been a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, probably not the time.
No. Right. If it were a 2 or a 3, no. Right.
And when we say be entertaining, there's an element here too of know your client, know your audience, know your guests. I have been in meetings with technical executives, and they, whether they're in a bad mood or they're just not people or whatever their thing is, they do not want to hear Fred Fuller's jokes. And I know that. It's shocking. Call the authorities.
Wow.
I know.
I'm surprised.
Okay. I'll give you all a list of names and phone numbers, and you can call them directly.
Why don't you like Fred Fuller's jokes?
Well, yeah, I could tell you that list starts right here at home. A list of people that don't want to hear Fred's jokes, but know your audience, right? It really is important. Like, some people want to joke around, some people don't, and you need to know and respect that. But don't do voodoo economics, right, John?
Can I put a coda on the Fred Waters story? Later on, someone in our company said, and I love this, that he said the tagline of this product should be, "Hey, do you know Smart Water? This is the opposite of that."
See, jealousy is so unflattering. It's so unflattering. People think it's a good look. It's not. It's not.
I thought that was fun. It was a funny line.
It's plaid and stripes, man. Don't do it.
Let's get serious and go back to our 7 things. Number 2 on the list of running a good QBR is to expand the audience. What does this mean, Fred? Expand the audience.
It's a great opportunity. I always think that a QBR is a great opportunity to help other people within the organization understand what you do and why you have a relationship in place. Right? There's always somebody with an agenda that may or may not be aligned with your agenda, with your direct client's agenda. And getting those folks in the room together to help them understand exactly what you do. And this should be an absolute fact. There should be nobody in any other company that can articulate your value prop better than you. Don't expect your client to do that for you, right? You have to do that. And so when you go to your client and you say, we're going to have a QBR, hey, I know we were talking about this thing over here in this other area of the business. I'd like to use 15 minutes in the QBR to talk about it. Do you think that'd be interesting for Shelley?
That's right. I like to every QBR try to see if we can think, if particularly it's a major one, think of like, are there other secondary people we can invite in so they can see how good we are, right? And that's what you're saying, and I think that's expanding your audience where it makes sense, where you can, is a really great idea.
Yeah. More touch points, the better. Definitely.
That's very closely related to the third one, which is coordinate with your client for the QBR. Right. So tell me what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, it is. It's what we were talking about a little bit earlier, right? As we transitioned into this area here, which is you do not want to sit in front of your client and say, hey, I'm going to throw up this bar graph of revenue and show you how awesome everything is. And you're showing 10% growth period over period. And you think that's absolutely wonderful, but your client expected 35. Right. So in your head, you're kind of like, hey, 10% growth. That's good. That's good growth. That's positive. It's a good story. It's but it doesn't meet their expectations. And if you walk into that meeting going, isn't 10% awesome? And they're going, not really, because it's not 35.
Yeah.
Like now you are completely misaligned on that piece of the conversation. And I promise you, it will carry through the entire QBR.
Yeah.
Right. So just take a few minutes to align, right?
My example is always, and what I talk to my account management teams about is, really, you should send, if you have materials for the QBR, whether that's some kind of document or PowerPoint or whatever, send that ahead of time, right? Send it 24 hours ahead of time. One, it'll force you to be done earlier, which is, all goodness. But two, you really don't want to surprise your client, particularly if there's something in there that could be potentially damaging to them, right? So maybe the work could hurt the working team, make them look bad in front of their boss. And so you don't want to do that. And then conversely, the other thing is, if there's an agenda item that the working team that you work with is trying to get in front of their boss, you can help them do that by virtue of having this, meeting where the vendor comes in, right? So there's tons of value. So, like walking to the QBR where everybody's totally cold and then you unveil this grand PowerPoint that you made, you can imagine like a curtain parting.
My masterpiece.
Yes, this masterful. That's actually not the way to do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love the second part of that, John. So you're going to make sure that you coordinate with your client. There's a whole host of reasons, but the two big ones are what I mentioned, which is not going in tone deaf, making sure that you're aligned with their hot topics and so forth. But the second piece is you can be an advocate for your client to achieve their goals. Mm-hmm. Right. They want to influence another part of the organization. Maybe they can use your product to help do that. Well, then I'm at your service. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that actually is a good lead into the fourth one, which you referenced a minute ago about what, know whether or not you're a 7 out of 10 or a 2 out of 10, which is don't go in tone deaf to where the overall relationship is. That's number 4, knowing whether you're in red, yellow, or green with the client.
Yeah, those two just are, they're probably sub bullets, right, of the same thought, which is just that overall alignment. Being misaligned on anything, right?
Yeah, and it does all tie together, right? Like I thought you made a great point earlier. Like if the relationship is in the ditch, then your QBR needs to be about that. Show them that you're in the ditch, that you as a vendor acknowledge you're in the ditch, and you have a plan to get out of the ditch, right? Like that's what the QBR is about. It'd be great to do all these other things that we're talking about, show them the future and show them, be entertaining and make jokes and show them the Fred water and all that fun stuff. But if you're in the ditch, then the QBR needs to be about the ditch and how you're going to get out. Like you got to be real about that, right? So that's not being tone deaf is really important.
I did go to a QBR one time where that was essentially the case. Mm-hmm. Go into the QBR and it wasn't my client. I was there for backup or whatever, right?
You were there to laugh at the account manager?
I was there to laugh and make my bad jokes and bring Fred water. And this cat rolls in and does the whole thing of like finger guns and we're all golden. And at the end, they just attacked him for his lack of awareness of what it was. And it was utterly embarrassing. What was crazy, though, was that particular account manager, after we walked out of the meeting, I swear, looked at everybody on our team and went, I actually think that was a really good meeting. And we all were like, that person didn't last very long. Didn't have.
Were you in the same meeting I was in?
Yeah. I think that was a pretty good, really. Like,
no, it wasn't. It was terrible.
It was horrible.
I'm gonna wager that person probably broke every rule that we're outlining here about prepping for a QBR.
Every one of them. That's where half of these rules came from. That
one meeting, right? Just went terribly wrong.
Don't do this. Yeah, exactly.
Always fun to watch that when you're not the one on the hook for the for whatever it is, right? Yeah.
You got to try not to laugh. It's so, oh my God, it's great entertainment though.
Yeah.
Great entertainment. But you will make that mistake one time and one time only.
Right.
So this is going to our next point here. Telling stories in your QBR.
Yeah. So along the lines of, I can't tell you what content to put in your QBR because I'm not in your business. Right. But as a general rule, like you can think about the 3 things we outlined earlier in terms of the content, but another way to think about it would be to think about for your QBR, try to think of it as a story a little bit. So that's our other suggestion for actually creating the content. What we mean by that is, don't, it's about going back to the basics, right? So tell them the story of why you're there. And if I could recommend a book to our listeners that is really good, that talks about how to create this story, it's called Made to Stick. and it's by a couple guys who really what you're making a face.
No, keep going.
It's called Made to Stick. It's a really good book, and it talks about how to craft a story for any kind of business meeting. But think about it, and so any kind of story is almost like a 3-act play, right? So the hero of the story is the client, right? So think of them as the hero. Tell them why your relationship was founded, right? Telling that story of like, why are we in business together in the first place? Or what problem were they trying to solve? What was the complication that they were trying to solve, and how your product is the solution, right? So think about, if you start to think about it in terms of everything is a little story or a little play like that, that'll actually drive your content. It'll force you to show them things that are maybe to you old news, but because you have the curse of knowledge, you only want to talk about things that are like kind of the hot topics, but it'll force you to go backwards and say, well, why are we here in the first place, right? Well, you were trying to solve for low adoption of your product. Our product has these 5 features that make consumers want to adopt it, right? So I'm going to go back and remind you about those 5 features. And now you're the hero of the story, and look how we've grown because you adopted us as the product. So that's my point, is like, to create the content, think about telling a story where the client is the hero. And that book does a really nice job of having, kind of outlining a lot of techniques to be able to do that. So, things like, really making it visual for a client, making it understandable, giving, sometimes single examples are a lot more powerful than data. So like, I can show them data about how great our customer care is, and we're under SLA or above SLA or whatever. I can show them all those stats, but what will actually be more powerful is to actually play a video of a satisfied customer and them talking about the product and your customer care. Like that actually will be more impactful than whatever stats you show. You still have to show the stats, but like creating a story out of it is so much more powerful. So we really advocate trying to figure out storytelling as part of your QBR.
I think there's a really, really critical nuance here. Mm-hmm. And that is, John, that when you walk through the 3-act play, the hero is the client.
Right.
Right. So careful, because in QBRs, oftentimes companies go in with the notion or the objective of making sure everybody understands how awesome they are.
Right.
Right. So I'm going to show you how cool my company is, Company A. I'm going to show you how cool they are. I'm going to show you how awesome I am. The victory, the absolute victory, is making your client that hero.
Right.
They don't care if you worked 70 hours last week.
Right.
They don't care how much free stuff you've given them. You should remind them of free stuff and make that a part of the conversation, but that should be very eloquent and so forth. But your client is the hero. This is not a time to defend your organization or prop your organization up in the false way, right? Making your client.
Well, don't do that alone. I mean, that is a part of it, but first and foremost is client. Try to figure out how to make the client the hero in the story. Right.
Yeah. Great point. Yeah. And then there's another interesting one here. So claim victory at least once during the QBR, which is kind of what I was just talking about a little bit. So keep the client the hero, but you claim victory. Talk through that.
Yeah. So that's number 6 on our list. And it's making sure that they know that you delivered something for them. Right. So yes, you want to make the client the hero, and we just talked about that. But on the other hand, you really, at least once in the QBR, claim some kind of major victory. You got something done for the client. Maybe it's something you delivered to a bunch of clients simultaneously, and that's fine. But claim that victory, right? Don't let it go unsung. And so I think there's sometimes some people, not you or I necessarily, but some people have a reticence to brag about themselves. And so like you really need to, as an account manager, get over that quickly, because you're representing not you, but the company, right? And so you want to claim at least once, if not several times, the victories of what you delivered. It seems sort of obvious, but you'd be surprised how often it gets kind of overlooked.
Yeah. And I think if there's if that creates a little confusion, because we're telling you to do two different things. We're telling you to make the client the hero, and that's your focus. And then we're telling you to claim victory. And I think the way to think about those two things is in a prioritized list. Your first objective is to make the client the hero. Somewhere along the way, you need to show, what your victories are, which should be in support of the primary message of your client being the hero. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, account management, we live in a world of gray, right? Like we're business decision makers and we have to make business decisions in an uncertain environment without all the facts. And so I think often give contradictory advice, but it still holds. You have to hold two separate thoughts in your head at the same time. But yeah, absolutely. So, and we're careful to say claim victory at least once. We're actually saying is maybe a lot more than once if you can.
Yeah. I mean, goodness gracious, you gotta lay claim to your successes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then our final tactic is be composed even when the client shoots holes in you. A lot of times I've seen in QBRs where the meeting kicks off and, we do our usual thing. We've talked about many other podcasts where we say, hey, or what are the things that are on your agenda that you want to make sure that we talk about today? And, that opens the door for them to begin the lamentations of, all the things that you've done wrong as a vendor provider to them. And so that opens that door and they may step through it and start shooting holes. So what do we do when that happens? Do we say, okay, be quiet now. I have a PowerPoint to show you.
Mm-hmm. That's
exactly what we do. No, that's not what we do. We don't.
No, that's not what we do.
Don't do that. Yeah. No, we start actively listening, right? And we put our pencils down and we put our PowerPoint down and we say, oh, okay, Mr. Client, great. Sounds like you've got something to tell me. Let's hear all of it, right? And stay composed.
You know what, John, it is a strategy that is at the top of my list of strategies. And that is when you go into that meeting, be it QBR or otherwise, surrendering control up front to the client to say, we've got stuff here. I've got an agenda. I've got a big PowerPoint, all that. But I really want to make sure that we're focused on your priorities. So I would love to start with what's on your mind. Right. It is the greatest thing in the world. It completely, it takes everything down. You're telling the client you're in control. You're telling the client I'm here for you, and you should be. And all those things should be very true. But how you convey that oftentimes can be a little bit difficult. And so going in and opening that, being exposed like that and saying, client, the microphone's yours, do whatever you want, is just a great way to diffuse any tension that might be in the room. And then, to your point, there may be a response where they're coming after you about a few things.
Yeah.
Right.
This reminds me of, I had a really tough client one time and we were having like a 3-hour QBR. We took like a, bio break in the middle of it. I was walking out with another executive and we were walking past like the COO of the company's office, and he called us in and he's kind of was like, hey, how's it going in there? And, we told him they'd spent the first hour and a half just shooting us up, right? Blowing us away. And he's like, yeah, I kind of expect it's like you guys are like at a Bugs Bunny cartoon where you get all shot up and then somebody drinks a glass of water and it comes shooting out all the little holes. You guys are like that. I was like, yeah, thanks, boss. That's awesome. Now we're going to go back in there and take it some more, So yeah, good. That's what I get paid for, I guess. But, it is a little bit like that sometimes. And it is what it is.
Well, and I think that response, you bring up a great point, right? The response is, okay, yep, I understand, right? It's not that you don't care, and it's not being a smart aleck, right? It's I understand, but it's also resigning yourself to the fact that when that happens, and when they really open it up and they're coming after you for things, answer what you can. If there are things you can solve in the moment, solve them. But there are going to be a lot of things that you can't solve or answer in that moment. And it's okay to give it time.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. All right. Well, we'll just mention so those are our 7 steps to a great QBR that's going to enable you to remind the client why you're there. So we'll mention the 7 steps. So number 1, bring Fred water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that still on the market? We need to go research that.
No, help people. Be entertaining. Don't bring Fred
Be entertaining.
water.
Number 1, expand your audience. Coordinate with the client for the QBR. Don't be tone deaf. Know where you're at with your client before you go in there. Make your QBR a story. Claim victory at least once during the QBR, and be composed even when they're shooting holes in you.
Cool.
All right. Good stuff. Well, another podcast partner. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, man, I enjoyed it. Another one in the can. Thanks for listening, and tune in next episode when we're going to talk about...
Well, I don't know. We're making this up as we go along, so I don't know what we're going to talk about.
Okay. Well,
all right.
Check us out.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Fred and John would like to hear from you. Go to brown-fuller.com with comments and questions, and rate us on your favorite podcast platform.